we prepare today to have the Lord's Supper celebrated together in a different way than we maybe have in the past, using different elements, it is, I think, sort of indicative of this year and this season that we have been trying to do this for about a month now. And between weather and COVID and all the other things, it has not been gone off as scheduled. But we're grateful to be able to celebrate this as the body together, especially here with the beginning of the Lenten season, as we are focused and looking ahead to the coming of the Easter time and the time that we sort of focus upon ourselves and spend some time in our preparation. And what better way there is to begin that preparation time than by celebrating around the Lord's table. And as I was thinking about this week of all the sort of binding that together, I was thinking about how personal all of these things are. As we look at Lent and at our part in that and how it affects us and the individuality that we approach this season with, as well as the Lord's Supper, how personal it is. The one good thing is no matter how big the crowd or how small the crowd that we celebrate the Lord's Supper in, it is about each individual. It is about you and I, how we come to the table. So as I was thinking about that, I thought of a passage in John's Gospel in John chapter 9 that I think is really one of the more personal encounters that Jesus had with an individual, and how that personal account affects all the people around him. And as we go through this in John chapter 9 of the healing of the man born blind, I think it speaks to me of how we, as we come together, all bring different perspectives, bring different backgrounds, bring different thoughts to this time when we gather here in unison around the table, as we celebrate the Lord's Supper, as we share the elements. We are like the diverse group of people here. We've all come from different places. But what this group was gathered around was the person of Christ, and as are we here today. So John chapter 9, we're going to be looking at the entire chapter, but I'm only going to read the first 12 verses here this morning. And as he, being Jesus, passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And the disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he should be born blind? And Jesus answered, it was neither that this man sinned nor his parents, but it was in order that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me as long as it is day. Night is coming when no man can work. While I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. And when he had said this, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle and applied the clay to his eyes. And he said to him, go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sent. And he went away and washed and came back seeing. The neighbors therefore, and those who previously saw him as a beggar, were saying, is this not the one who used to sit and beg? And others were saying, this is he. And others were saying, no, he is like him. And he kept saying, I am the one. Therefore they were saying to him, how then were your eyes opened? And he answered, the man who is called Jesus made clay, anointed my eyes, and said, go to Siloam and wash. And I went away and washed, and I received sight. And they said to him, where is he? And he said, I do not know. The people that were affected by this, that we'll see, all were looking at this miracle in different ways. But the one I've always enjoyed focusing on is the sort of the protagonist, the one who is at the center of this, and that's the man who was healed, the man who was born blind. And the disciples, first of all, the first thing they did was looked about the accepted belief that when someone is born with a particular malady, there was a cause for it, that the sin in someone's life caused this physical consequence. And it could be passed from parents to children. And they said, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Been kind of hard for him to, since he had not been born yet. But there had to be a cause, there had to be a sin issue to it. And Jesus said it was not him or his parents. It was so it'd be glorified. And he said that all suffering is not due to sin, that God can work through suffering to achieve his purposes. So he used this as a moment of teaching to them of what they assumed to be true, but yet was not true. So it begins from the very beginning when he encountered him, before the healing even took place. This teaching and how the ones who were affected by it. And the disciples here were learning that Jesus can work in any situation, in any circumstance, and they were witnesses to the power of God. And after the man was healed, his friends, the ones who had known him and said, were you not the one who used to beg there by the garden? They doubted the validity of what was going on. We read through verse 9. Says, I'm the one, and therefore, in verse 10, how then were your eyes open? They said, is this the one? I think it's the one. Well, then how did this happen? Give us an explanation. They saw that there was a personal touch, and he said, this man, he put this clay on my eyes, he told me to go wash here, and I could see. Well, where is he? I don't know. What happened? Who was it? Give us the results. Give us the details. We want to see the source of the miracle. We want to be able to pinpoint what happened. So the man's friends were affected in that they saw what the Lord was doing, but they were not part of it. They questioned it because it did not happen to them. They looked at it from the outside in and were confused. Then you have the Pharisees, beginning in verse 13. They brought to the Pharisees him who was formerly blind. Now it was the Sabbath on the day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. And the Pharisees said, how did he receive? And he told them again this story. He put the clay on my eyes, I washed, and I said, each time he tells this, it gets a little shorter. Each time it gets a little more succinct. And it's, I think, very humorous. Some of the Pharisees were saying the man is not from God, he does not keep the Sabbath. Don't care that he just healed you and that your eyes are open. It was on the Sabbath. We got to keep the law. And what do you say about this man? He said he was a prophet. And he goes on and says, is this your son? And they got his parents. And yes, this is the one. We know that he was born blind, but he does not, he sees now. How can this be? Who is this person? The Pharisees could not get past the fact that Jesus acted in a way that was not in keeping with what they felt was acceptable. They refused to believe the man's story because it was outside of their realm of belief, because what they did not expect it. And more than the fact that he was healed was the fact that somebody had operated outside the law. Even if good had been come, you have to keep the law. You have to allow us to be the keepers, because that's what they were. They were the keepers of the law. They were the arbiters. They were the ones who said this is in keeping with the tradition. And they felt they were doing a good job. They didn't want that boat rocked in any way, shape, or form. And they did not want to believe by faith. They did not want this man to say, he put this on me, I went to wash and I was healed. Oh, that could never be, because if that was the case, then it was outside of the control of their law, of how they perceived it to be, because everything was consequence. Everything was an act and the consequences of that act. The parents, they couldn't explain what had happened to him. They said that they were afraid of the church leaders, they were afraid of the Pharisees and all those in control, more than they were willing to believe the source of their son's healing. They said, we don't know. We really, yeah, it's him, he's of legal age, but we really don't know. And then the man himself, he begins to get a little sharp with everybody. And this is the part that's interesting to me. Verse 24, so a second time they called the man who had been blind, and he said to him, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. And he said, whether he's a sinner I do not know. One thing I do know, I was blind, and now I see. They said, who did this to you? How did he open your eyes? He said, I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? You do not want to become his disciples too, do you? So now he's getting a little cheeky, you know. He's getting a little ahead of himself here. And they reviled him and said, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses. As for this man, we do not know where he's from. The man answered and said to them, well, here's an amazing thing, that you do not know where he's from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is God-fearing and does his will, God hears him. This man was not from God, we could do nothing. And they answered and said to him, you were born entirely in sins, and you're teaching us, and they put him out. He would not follow the rules. He would not stay with the script. And here's this man himself exhibiting great faith to stand before the power. The people had the power to put him out of society. Because if you were outside the temple, if you were outside the accepted faith, you were not allowed to be a part of society in any way, shape, or form. So it was a great risk he was taking by taking this stand. And he even feared ridicule at the hands of those, his friends, his family, the Pharisees, all the people around him. He stood in the midst of that because it happened to him. And this is where the story, I think we need to camp for a while. It is about personal touch. It is about an individuality of Jesus' touch upon this man. We can know about God all we want to. We can read about him. We can have all the doctrinal knowledge. And unfortunately, through the years, there's been a lot of folks with a lot of doctrinal and church and religious knowledge, but they had no experience. When we gather around the table, when we come to celebrate the Lord's Supper, whenever we have communion, what we're doing, as the table says in front of you, this do in remembrance of me. We are remembering something. I can't remember for you. I can't share my remembrances. I mean, I can. I can tell you about it. I can show you pictures of it. I can do all these things. But you don't know them. The depths of them. The vividness of them. I can have a wonderful experience, or I can go to a marvelous place and I can explain it to you. When we were in New Mexico a few years ago, we went up to the top of Sandia Peak outside of Albuquerque. Beautiful. It's about 11,000 square feet, about 11,000 feet high. You ride this tramway up, and if you look out, and it seems, if you've ever been to New Mexico, it's flat anyway, and now you're this high, you can see, seems like, to the other end of the world. It's wonderful. And it's awesome. When you tell somebody about that, when you share that memory, you can say, in the pictures I took, you can say, see, you can see forever. And people will look at them and go, that's nice. Because you can't capture the scope of it. I love to go with Wiseman's View and be standing there looking at the gorge, and people come up and they'll take pictures, and I want to go, it's not going to look the same. When you get home and start to say develop, I'm showing my, when you get home and develop them, whenever you show them off of that SD card, it's not going to look like what you're seeing here, because this is your experience. That is your remembrance. That is a segment. It's a part of that. And when we share with other people the individuality of the Lord in us, they look at us and they go, that's nice. That's wonderful. But it doesn't have an impact upon them because they don't own it. And that's what this man kept saying. What happened? I was blind and now I see. What we want to know is really what happened. I was blind and now I see. That's all that mattered to him. Who is this man? I don't know. What happened? He put this on my face. I went and washed. I was blind and now I see. When Jesus later encountered him, verse 35, Jesus heard that he had been put out by the Pharisees, and finding him said, do you believe in the Son of Man? And he answered and said, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? He didn't know who had done this. And Jesus said, you have both seen him, and he is the one who is talking with you. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. You see, the result of this personal experience is an awareness of who the Lord is and the subsequent worship of him that is born out of this relationship that we have individually, personally. Whenever we gather around the table, whenever we share this communion, it's such a wonderful time because we are collectively sharing individual responses. We are in a communal situation. We are gathered as the body, but we individually receive because it's up to each and every one of us individually to recognize the impact that this has upon our life, that the Lord has upon our life, that we are changed by. So many times we try to show the picture of our faith. We try to share the experience. And we're frustrated because it's like, and I've used the example before, but when everyone used to take slides of things, remember all the slides? And somebody would come over to your house and you'd bring out that projector and those carousels and everybody would go, ugh. Because you'd show 47 pictures of your trip to wherever, and after about the third one, everybody's eyes had already rolled back in their head. But you were committed now, you had to go through the whole thing. And about halfway through, one of the slides was hanging up and it wouldn't work, and everybody was going, can we just stop? Because it didn't mean as much to them as it does to you. What we share, what we bring, what we present, what we bear witness to is Christ in us, opening our eyes, much as he did this man. What happened? I was blind and now I see. So when we gather, we are a bunch of previously blind people who now see. But I see with my eyes and not yours. I see with my perspective, with what he's done in me. So when we gather together and we celebrate and this do in remembrance of me, we recognize through that shed blood and broken body that this is a symbol of we have the means by which we come into communion with him, into a relationship with him. It becomes very personal. It becomes intimate. I've always said that the sharing of the Lord's Supper is the most intimate thing that you can do collectively. It is the most powerful thing that you can do because this is you responding. It says, this do in remembrance of me. Who remembers? I remember. Whenever I share in these elements, whenever I come to the table, I'm not remembering what he did for you. I'm remembering what he did for me. His sacrifice for me. His blood given for me. The brokenness for me. How it affects my relationship. What gift he has given me. We all react differently when confronted by God. We see in this passage when Jesus came into this day, Everybody was changed. Everybody was sort of rocked by what had taken place. But there was one man who at the end of the day worshiped him. And that was the man whose eyes had been opened, who is the sum total of his religious knowledge and all of his experiences wrapped up in one thing. I was blind and now I see. We approach the Lord spiritually blind, and he opens our eyes, and we see him. And sometimes he comes back to us and says, "Do you know who this was?" And says, "I'm not real sure." It says, "You have both seen him and are standing before you now." And he worshiped him. Whenever we gather together, whenever we share these elements, we are standing before him. Because this was his admonition to us. This was his purpose on those days whenever they were gathered together. It says, when you do this, as often as you do this, do in remembrance of me what I am getting ready to do, what this day, what this time represents. Those chapters later on in John, wherever we have such an intimate look into him washing the disciples' feet, into sharing with them these elements, into preparing them for what is going to be happening in the hours ahead. It's personal, it's intimate, it's heart-wrenching. And he says, each time do it in remembrance of me. So when we gather here in a moment, whenever we pass these elements out and we partake, remember you were blind and now you see. And you see through eyes that have been opened. And it's wonderful. And it's miraculous. And it's a gift from the Lord. Father, we thank you. Truly, as we come together here, that you've helped us to see you holy, righteous, loving, kind, merciful, gracious unto us. Lord, we, your people, celebrate what you have done. We remember in each heart, in each life, what you have done. Father, give us insight. Give us a sense of your presence, your purpose, your way. In Christ's name, amen. Amen.